then a few days after Obama's speech at West Point, and after some protests, we have this article from the Washington Post. Gates says no deadlines on troop withdrawal. The withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan, scheduled to begin in July 2011, will probably take 2 or 3 years, Defense Secretary Robert M. Gates said Thursday, although he added that there are no deadlines in terms of when our troops will all be out. The Pentagon, meanwhile, quietly acknowledged slippage on the front end of the 30,000 plus troop deployment that President Obama authorized for the first half of 2010. New details fleshed out the revamped strategy Obama outlined Tuesday night as Gates, Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton, and Mike Mullen, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, testified before Congress on the plan for a second day. In an opening statement and in comments at a hearing of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Gates tried to clarify his response to sharp questioning the day before and whether the deadline to begin withdrawal was as hard and fast as Obama had appeared to make it. In July of 2011, the time at which the president said the United States will begin to draw down our forces, will be the beginning of a process, Gates said, but the pace and character of that drawdown, which districts and provinces are turned over and when, will be determined by conditions on the ground. It will be a gradual but inexorable process. The official described the deployment curve as beginning at a baseline of 68,000 U.S. troops now in Afghanistan, rising at a 45-degree angle to 100,000, then continuing horizontally until July of 2011 before beginning to slope back down. The fall could be steep if everything is hunky-dory, he said, but it could be much more elongated. Now, on top of the U.S. troops being sent in there, we have an article from AllGov on December 4th, written by Noel Brinkerhoff. The other Afghanistan surge, contractors. While the media focuses on the number 30,000, as in the number of new troops being sent to Afghanistan, an even larger number has been widely ignored. 100,000. This figure represents approximately the number of contractors working in the country at the behest of the U.S. government, a figure that is mostly a guess because no one in the Obama administration can or is willing to offer the exact total. Based on statistics released by the Defense Department, the number of contractors in Afghanistan jumped by 40% between the end of June and the end of September. The Wall Street Journal reported the total to be about 104,101, with the vast majority, 78,430, being locals hired by companies contracting with the Pentagon. No one is sure how many contractors handle security as Blackwater did in Iraq. Guesstimates range from 7% to 16%. These contractors are armed and providing protection that frees up soldiers for other operations. However, Army officials have complained that some of these security contractors actually hamper operations because they are trigger-happy. Private guards have killed or wounded more than 30 innocent civilians in one district, Maywand, of Western Kandahar province alone. The rest of the contractors handle duties like serving food, driving trucks, construction work, and transporting fuel. The inability on the part of the administration to precisely report how many contractors are in Afghanistan has resulted in criticism from former and non-governmental sources. Michael Thibault, co-chair of the Bipartisan Commission on Wartime Contracting, has said the uncertainty over the contractor force size permits and invites waste, fraud, and abuse of taxpayer money and undermines the achievement of U.S. mission objectives. When military officials failed to provide Congress with exact totals at a committee hearing, former GOP Congressman Christopher Shea said, "I kind of want to scream." Now we have an article from antiwar.com on December the 3rd. This was written by Jason Ditz. White House approves Pakistan drone strike escalation. In a move officials are saying is meant to coincide with its much more talked about Afghanistan escalation, the White House has reportedly approved an expansion of the CIA drone attacks against northern Pakistan. The expansion means an increase in attacks in North and South Waziristan, and officials hinted at the possibility of striking against Balochistan, a move often spoken of. Pakistan has publicly objected to the Waziristan strikes, even while it has privately made deals with the U.S. to cooperate in the strikes. Attacking Balochistan, however, would be a game-changer, as the Pakistani government has vowed to stop such strikes. And then we have another article from antiwar.com. This one is from December 1st. U.S. looks to bypass Karzai in running Afghanistan. In a move being forwarded primarily by U.S. Special Envoy Richard Holbrooke, the United States is seeking to have an international high representative appointed to control day-to-day operations of the Afghan government. The position looks to be an analog of the High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina, though the position at this point looks to have a more ambitious amount of control over the domestic operations of the Afghan state, effectively reducing the power of President Hamid Karzai. America's European allies are reportedly expressing concerns over the plan, while conceding that an internationally appointed leader probably would be more efficient. Still, the exit strategy is built on the assumption of letting the Afghan government eventually establish more control over the nation, while the U.S. plan looks to drain even more legitimacy from the Karzai government. Now, along with the escalation, we have an article from the World Socialist website on December 1st. Torture continues at U.S. prisons in Afghanistan. Recent media reports reveal that the U.S. military continues to carry on torture and illegal detention in Afghanistan at a dungeon known to inmates as the Black Prison. The jail, located on the Bagram Air Base next to the notorious Bagram Prison north of Kabul, operates under the executive order of President Obama. After entering office, Obama ordered the closure of Central Intelligence Agency prison black sites, which were in fact no longer active, but exempted those prisons run by the military special operations. 2 teenage Afghan boys told the Washington Post that they were beaten, photographed naked, sexually humiliated, denied sleep, and held in solitary confinement by American guards at the prison this year. Interviewed at a juvenile detention center in Kabul, where they have been transferred, the teenagers presented a detailed, consistent portrait of the abuse they experienced, the newspaper reported. The descriptions of the prison were confirmed by 2 other former prisoners. In addition to being punched and slapped, Rashid, who the Post described as younger than 16, said he was forced to view pornography, alongside a photograph of his mother. He was also forced to strip naked in front of about a half a dozen U.S. soldiers. They touched me all over my body, he said. They took pictures and they were laughing and laughing. They were doing everything. Now we have an article from Ross Story on November 3rd. ACLU, Supreme Court decision won't end torture photos fight. Despite efforts by all 3 branches of the government to keep photos of abuse at U.S. military detention centers secret, the American Civil Liberties Union vows that it won't stand still in the face of such a dangerous precedent. The Supreme Court on Monday set aside an appeals court's ruling that the Obama administration must release the photos, citing a new law passed in October that gives the Secretary of Defense the right to exempt photos from Freedom of Information laws. That law was passed by Congress and signed by President Barack Obama in October as part of a Homeland Security spending bill. This month, Defense Secretary Robert Gates used his new powers to order the suppression of the photos. The case now goes back to the lower court, which will reflect on its ruling in light of the new law. And to close up our segment on Afghanistan, I have a video. Before you watch it, the title of this video on YouTube is CNN Helps Push New Afghanistan War Tax as Nationwide Sacrifice.
The American people need greater transparency, greater clarity about how much this is costing them. So you've proposed something, along with several of your colleagues, the Share the Sacrifice Act of 2010. I want to show some of the details of it. Couples earning up to $150,000 receive a 1% tax increase. Your proposal would exempt servicemen and women and their families who served in Iraq and Afghanistan since 2001, and it would exempt families who've lost an immediate relative in the war. So if you make $150,000 or more, you would pay 1%, and then you would escalate up. If you make $250,000, you'd pay more, and so on up the scale, correct?
Yes, and my point and our point is simply that in this war, we have not had any sense of shared sacrifice. The only people being asked to sacrifice are military families. They've had to go to the well again and again and again, and yet everybody else in society, they're essentially told to go shopping by the previous president. I just think that if this war is important enough to engage in long term, it's important enough to pay for. We're told by people like General Petraeus that we need to be prepared to commit 8 to 10 years. First of all, I don't think that's sustainable. But if you're going to do that, at least you ought to pay for it so it doesn't destroy